bylaw 0465, dangerous dog bylaw, to afford any person with an interest in the outcome of the matter an opportunity to make representation respecting designation of a dog as dangerous by the municipal law enforcement officer. Can I get a mover and a seconder to adopt the rules of procedure? Councillor Halpin, Councillor Watson.
Mr. Chair, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Councillor Watson, that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Central Elgin adopt the dangerous dog hearing rules of procedure.
All in favor? Carried. What method of notice and when was notice given to the public for this meeting?
Mr. Chair, as per requirements of bylaw 465, notice and disclosure documents were delivered to both the appellant and the claimant on May 31st, 2023. Notice of the hearing was posted on the municipality's website on May 31st, 2023.
Have you received any written submission on the potential designation?
Mr. Chair, I have not.
At this time, I would ask that participants attending in person or via Zoom abide by the following. Please be respectful of all participants, including council, other members of the public, and staff. If you cannot be respectful, you will be removed from the meeting. Because the meeting is being held in person and via Zoom, in-person attendees will be asked to come forward to the podium to speak once the meeting is open to the public. Those persons attending via Zoom will be asked to click the raise hand icon once the meeting is open to the public, and they will be admitted to the meeting to speak. Those persons who have been called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial 1 once the meeting is open to the public, and they will be admitted to speak. When you have been given the opportunity to speak, please provide your full name and address for the record. The appellant or representative to provide testimony or introduce evidence, including witnesses or under submissions. I'd like to call the appellant or representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first question I have is that on the agenda, the appellant's materials are not included. There are 98 pages, and I believe it was Ms. Leach who was just speaking who indicated that no written materials were provided. Respectfully, that's not accurate. 98 pages were provided, and I'm wondering why, even though the agenda says all relevant documents are posted, that the appellant's 98 pages were not posted.
I've been advised they were circulated to council.
Given that this is a public proceeding and the website specifically says all relevant materials are posted, why are those not available to the public? They were redacted as per the request of Ms. Leach for that reason.
Would you like to continue with your submissions?
I would, but again, for the purposes of the record, I'm very troubled that the appellant's materials were not provided to the public for this proceeding. Before moving forward, I am waiting on 3 decisions. When we left the last proceeding or the last day on May 8th, council went into closed session and then indicated it was adjourning to make decisions on 3 preliminary matters. Those were bias, the duration of the hearing, and the limitation on witnesses. I have requested repeatedly of Ms. Leach, no less than 5 times since May 8th, what the decisions are and when they will be rendered. I have not received a response. So respectfully, I'm asking that council provide a decision in respect to each of those 3 preliminary matters.
Okay, I'll speak to this one part. This act and any rule made under this tribunal section or section 17.1 or section 25.1 shall be literally construed and secure the just, most expeditious and cost-efficient determination of every proceeding on its merit. So I'd like to proceed. Would you like to proceed?
Respectfully, Mr. Chair, we were all prepared to proceed on May 8th. Council opted to adjourn because it could not make a decision on 3 straightforward preliminary questions. I was assured that decisions would be made. The municipality's council was present. Council, as in COUNSEL, was also present at the time. And it was indicated, and it is recorded, that decisions would be rendered. Is council not prepared to make a decision on those 3 questions?
We're prepared to go forward with what we're here to do today and to determine if this is a dangerous dog and if it stands or not. And if you'd like to continue with your submissions, we're happy to do that.
Okay, so the first one is the preliminary matter was in relation to a concern of bias and reasonable apprehension of bias in respect to Mayor Sloan and Council Member Watson. Are either of those individuals on the council today?
Yes.
May I know the identity of the person or persons who are going to be rendering a decision?
Council that's present is rendering a decision.
Will Mayor Sloan and or Council Member Watson be part of that decision-making panel?
Yes, they will.
Okay, for the purposes of the record, I would like to indicate that pursuant to bylaw section 2.7, the duty of council is to provide a fair and impartial proceeding. And this issue in and of itself, despite the fact that it's been made very clear that having these 2 individuals respectfully amounts to bias or reasonable apprehension of bias, council is proceeding irrespective of that fact. For the purposes of the record, I'm indicating here that this in and of itself is grounds for an appeal. The second question relates to the duration of the hearing. It was made very clear that the appellant needed a longer hearing, and the fact that the canine control officer did not even consider the appellant's position before hastily issuing a dangerous dog order was the basis for that request. This hearing has been set for 2 hours at a time that is not convenient for the appellant. I am indicating that for the purposes of the record and respectfully indicate that that in and of itself is grounds for an appeal. The second question pertains to the witness limitation. There was a request made on behalf of the appellant for which council adjourned on May 8th and indicated they would arrive at a decision. That question was whether more than 3 individuals could act as witnesses. I have not received a response. We will proceed on the basis that council will allow additional witnesses beyond that 3. If I am not correct in my understanding and council indicates that only 3 witnesses can be present, again, for the purposes of the record, that decision in and of itself will be the basis for an appeal. With respect to the proceeding today, is it the position of the council that the municipal evidence will go in first or the appellant's evidence will go in first?
The appellant.
And as a matter of clarification, the appellant reserves the right to question both the canine control officer and the complainants. And based on counsel's position that the appellant will provide evidence first, I am under the impression that thereafter we will go into the municipal evidence and the appellant will have the opportunity to cross-examine, as is the standard procedure in any of these proceedings. So given the interest of time, I will dispense with opening remarks and I will ask that we proceed with the first witness on behalf of the appellant. And for ease of reference, I ask that I be permitted to share my screen, as the 98 pages of documents which were not available for the public are now going to be visible as we go along.
Okay.
Thank you. Is the screen with the first page appellant's book of documents visible?
Yes.
Thank you. The first witness on behalf of the appellant is Anne McDonald. And Ms. McDonald has provided a statement well in advance of this proceeding. And for ease of everyone's reference, it is at page 59. And I will bring us there. And before asking that she be designated as an expert witness, I'm going to ask her to authenticate the documents. Ms. McDonald, are you present?
I am.
Thank you. I understand in anticipation of this hearing, you prepared both a report as well as providing your credentials. Is that right?
I did.
And I'm going to scroll through these documents and ask you to look at pages 59 and 60 and indicate if you're, and 61, and indicate if you're familiar with those documents and why.
I am. So I took the pictures and I wrote the document.
Thank you. And moving on to pages 62 and 63, I'd ask you if you're familiar with those documents.
I am as well.
And why are you familiar with those?
I provided that as well, along with my documentation and pictures.
Thank you. With respect to your qualifications, how many years have you worked with dogs?
I've worked with dogs for approximately 40 years.
And approximately how many dogs have you worked with?
I've worked with approximately 25,000 dogs plus.
What is the name of your business?
Canine Concepts, operating under Canine Force Free Incorporated.
And if I could ask you to take us through these 9 highlights that are enumerated on pages 62 and 63.
Sure. These were not in any chronological order. And just to go through, the London Humane Society, as the animal behavior consultant, my position was to assess the dogs and decide whether they were adoptable or not. During my time there, I developed a program called the Intensive Assessment Program, which I believe is still in use today, to help determine the adoptability and or liability of adoption. Number 2, I have on more than one occasion been qualified as an expert witness in dog behavior for Ontario court proceedings. I believe number 3 was temperament test associates. As an associate tester, we would run a series of 9 tests on mostly working or guard breeds to qualify them as suitable candidates to be for reproduction. Number 4, the St. Thomas Animal Services. I provided hands-on training to shelter staff in bite prevention and the safe handling of dogs in both the shelter environment as well as in transit, which included the loading and unloading of dogs into the municipal vehicle. Number 5, Animal Behavior College of California. I'm an instructor for the practical learning of students working with dogs in a professional capacity. Number 6, host of the TV series Wonderful World of Dogs. It was a 2-year family formatted program aired on the Global Television Network that included episodes on dog breeds, uses, training, events, medical practices through veterinary and behavior modification. Number 7, University of Guelph Animal Sciences. I completed studies in how dogs learn with a special interest in aggression. I have studied and continue to do so on a regular basis under numerous world experts and specialists in the field of animal behavior. Number 8, I've trained and handled well over 25,000 dogs in a professional capacity in many aspects of work, including law enforcement, Department of National Defense, sniffer dogs used in detection for tracking narcotics and low blood sugar, service and support animals, television, movies, and commercials. Number 9, the Canadian Kennel Club. Under the CKC or Canadian Kennel Club guidelines, I have shown dogs, bred dogs, trained and assessed dogs. I continue to upgrade through courses offered to their members.
Thank you. How many Rottweiler type breeds have you worked with?
I would say 30% of the dogs that I have worked with have been Rottweiler or Rottweiler type breeds.
And what breed is Elliot?
He is a purebred Rottweiler.
Okay. Based on the qualifications that Ms. McDonald has provided, I'd ask that council designate her as an expert witness.
Yes.
Does council require me to delve further into her highlights at the risk of extending the qualification process longer than necessary, or is council prepared to make a decision on qualifying her as an expert witness based on what she's gone through?
I guess we can qualify her as being an expert witness.
Thank you. I'm going to return back to page 59, which is your report. And I understand that you prepared this specifically in relation to Elliot, is that right?
That's correct.
How long have you known Elliot?
Approximately 3 years.
And in what capacities have you known him?
I was working with Elliot in a training capacity, as well as he attended doggy daycare and have boarded with us as well.
Okay. And I understand that Elliot is currently a service dog, an emotional support animal for the appellant. Can you explain the process for his selection as an emotional support dog to assist with the appellant's disability?
He was selected by the breeder, and they would do a temperament test and an evaluation at that time to make sure he was qualified to do the skills and tasks he needed to do.
And what's involved in the temperament testing?
The temperament testing would go through his availability to how well he will train, how social he is, how outgoing, and if he is the right candidate temperament-wise for the job at task.
And what was determined about Elliot?
We determined that he was an excellent dog for the job, actually.
How would a muzzle impact Elliot's ability to carry out his work as an emotional support animal?
A muzzle would not allow him to continue his job. First of all, with not being able to communicate and not being able to breathe properly, or during heated times, such as summer, he wouldn't be able to go very far in a muzzle for sure. So his job would probably be null and void in the public at that point.
You characterize Elliot as having a, quote, well-balanced, friendly personality, end of quote, with a, quote, easygoing, gentle disposition, end of quote. Can you explain how you arrived at this opinion?
In the time that I have worked with Elliot, which has been about 3 years, he has to ongoing. We have to work with him, continue to train him, socialize him. And I have not seen anything towards aggression. And always he has been just an excellent candidate for the breed.
And in this section referred to as training/social skills, you talk about the continuous training. Can you elaborate on that?
For sure. Every year he has to be evaluated to make sure he can still perform the tasks. He's still a good member of society. He is still well balanced. And that's one of the qualifications of a service or emotional support dog, that we continually monitor them to make sure that everything is still, what do I want to say? We monitor them to make sure that they're still on the right path that way.
And you've characterized Elliot as a, quote, ambassador for his breed, end of quote. Can you explain what you mean by that?
When I first saw Elliot at 12 weeks, I did an initial evaluation on him, found him to be very balanced, very stable, and I sort of assessed that against the other Rottweilers. With Temperament Test Associates, we tested a number of Rottweilers and looked at temperament, and he was just such an ambassador for the breed that I thought he was more than the best participant for this job, actually.
And getting to the specific allegations and the altercation that unfolded, which was the precursor to this designation, I understand that Ms. Berry explained from her perspective what had unfolded with you. Is that correct?
She did.
Can you give us a synopsis of what you understand unfolded?
I understand that Elliot was on the berm. He ran up to the other dog, I believe it was Nick, and Nick, yes, was ill, poor health, not feeling well, and he snarled and bit Elliot first, and that caused this exchange.
You've indicated that it is important, extremely important, actually, are your words, that you emphasize that Elliot was not the aggressor. Can you explain why that's so important?
It's important to know that, number one, it's not consistent with the observations I've had over the last 3 years of Elliot, and he's not engaging with aggressive behavior with other dogs or people, and so that's why that was listed that way.
Okay. And what behavior on the part of Nick, the other dog, provoked Elliot from your perspective and your expertise?
Well, I can't imagine a dog confronted by a dog of Elliot's stature and size, and with owners probably tense, yelling, pulling on the lead, and upset, would in all likelihood react by ways of a growl, a snap, or a bite, and that makes total sense.
Why do you quote unquote trust Elliot approached Nick in a playful manner, unsuspecting of the reaction of Nick?
Well, if Elliot wanted to attack and cause damage, there would have been much more damage done.
Why would a snarl, growl, or nip from another dog, even one that is smaller in stature, cause a reaction from a dog the size of Elliot?
Well, dogs are dogs, and they tend to retaliate if provoked, and that would fall under the provisions of provoke. If I trust, ran up happily and was probably taken aback by Nick's approach.
Okay. And why would a commotion from the dog owners, such as yelling and being animated, garner a reaction from Nick?
Well, dogs are a reflection of our skills, and if he felt they were tensing up on the lead, often when we pull back, we're tense, we're yelling. Obviously, dogs can read that as something's wrong, something's going on, and that certainly could have set him off.
Nick's owners describe Elliot's behavior as a quote unquote attack. Why would you agree with that characterization, disagree with that characterization?
Well, knowing Elliot and his temperament, I would think that, as I said earlier, if Elliot had an agenda, there would have been much more damage done.
How would you conclude this incident still supports Elliot's demeanor as a calm, passive, and agreeable dog?
I would say that his ongoing training and his ongoing assessments do not support any of the story that I've heard.
Why is it important for a municipality or a canine control officer to consult with all parties, including the owner of the dog who is alleged to have engaged in certain behavior prior to concluding an investigation and issuing a dangerous dog designation?
I would think that Mr. Gomez is appointed by the municipality, and he's likely not a dog expert to any degree. I would expect, in all fairness, he would gather the info of the event from both parties, do his due diligence and research prior to the muzzle designation, and conduct a fair and impartial inquiry.
Thank you. In your professional opinion, why is Elliot not a dangerous dog or a potentially dangerous dog?
Again, consistent with my observations, he is not engaged in aggressive behavior. When he has been out with the other dogs, he will, and this is something you will see with dogs that are social, they will walk away from an altercation as opposed to engage in an altercation quite often.
Why would it be unfair and inhumane to require Elliot to wear a muzzle for the rest of his life?
I think that Elliot is used for a specific purpose, and Margaret has gone a long way in training and socializing and keeping that up with Elliot so that he can maintain the designation of emotional support dog. And I think that he would be unable to do that job.
What public safety concern is there for Elliot to be in public without a muzzle, based on your interactions of Elliot over the past 3 years?
Based on my interactions, I do not think there is a public safety, problem.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Those are all the questions I have. Some of the council members may have questions for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody have questions for Ms. McDonald? Councillor Halpin?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. McDonald. Would you say that there is more adverse impact for Elliot being made to wear a muzzle than for any other support dog being made to wear a muzzle per this bylaw?
For any other support dog, it depends on what the tasks or what the jobs are, but I think that he wouldn't be able to continue his job.
Thank you. Supplementary. What is your opinion on the use of muzzles in general?
From a human perspective, they don't make people feel comfortable. From a dog perspective, they can be on a very small or limited amount of time, especially in the heat, because dogs perspire through their tongue. So you have to watch that they don't overheat and have heat stroke.
Thank you. And through the chair to Ms. McDonald again, were you aware that Elliot has ceased continuing to be certified as a support dog?
No,
Thank you. Do you know then when his last assessment for that purpose was?
If I may, I can, so that Ms. McDonald can see the documentation in front of her, I can show her the current certification. This is a letter April 20th, 2023, which formed part of the book of documents that was provided to council several weeks ago. And
Thank you. Yes, I did see the document, Ms. Friedman. My question was more about the fact that the witness has made an expert statement to us that he is continually being reassessed. And Ms. Berry gave us a statement saying that he has not recertified in the last year and is not continuing to certify as a support animal. If I may continue with that, I had another question for Ms. McDonald about the details of the statement she provided, which was about the incident itself. And that was, you mentioned that the incident took place on the berm, but the email that I have from Mr. Gremenpray to Ms. Berry indicates that that was not the incident for which Elliot was designated, that there was a second incident that took place at the beach and that that was the one that resulted in the designation. Ms. McDonald, do you have any background on the beach incident and what the situation of aggression may have been there?
no, I don't. I thought we were talking about the same incident. Sorry.
Thank you. I think that's all of my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin. Councillor Connors.
Through you, Chair, to Ms. McDonald. You've indicated that you know the dog well through training and through doggy daycare. Have you ever seen the dog, Elliot, put in a confrontational situation when in your care, or have you ever seen the dog in a confrontational situation in the past?
I have. You're talking with dogs, I'm assuming?
Specifically with Elliot.
Yes. Yes.
Can you elaborate?
You will have discrepancies and disagreements within a dog pack, and that doesn't happen on a regular basis, but it does indeed happen. And I have seen Elliot certainly walk away from engaging in anything when he's been snarked at before. Dogs that are dark in color, big in nature, tend to be not as welcome as white or blonde dogs. And so quite a few dogs may be a little bit apprehensive about his look and his stature. And we often will see them give a snark to him, as we call it.
And by the same token, have you ever seen him engage when he was snarked at?
No, I have not.
Thank you.
I just have one comment for clarification. There was a statement made during your testimony that Elliot would, if he's designated a dangerous dog, he would have to wear a muzzle for the rest of his life. I believe it's just when he's in public, not the rest of his life, meaning wherever he is all the time.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, did you have another witness you'd like to call?
Yes, I just have a couple of clarifying questions for Ms. McDonald arising from the questions of counsel. The first is in relation to the document I have in front or that's displayed on the screen dated April 20th, 2023 from a registered therapeutic counselor, Ms. Jeremy. Can you read the last sentence of that letter, Ms. McDonald, in terms of how long the certification as an emotional support animal extends?
This letter expires 1 year from April 20th, 2023, at which time Ms. Berry will be assessed for continued need of an emotional support animal.
So would it be fair to say that April 20th, 2024 is the expiration?
It would.
Thank you. And with respect to the last question about muzzling, there was a comment about the muzzle doesn't need to be on when in private. And I'm wondering, and I understand you don't know the exact routine of Ms. Berry from a day-to-day basis, but can you tell me whether she spends 24 hours a day in private or if she goes out in public sometimes?
I know that she is out every day with Elliot in public.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. You're welcome to stay here, or if you have other commitments, you can exit the Zoom. In terms of the next witness, it's Judith Emery, and I understand she's been trying without success to enter the meeting. If someone from the municipality could let her in, I'd appreciate that.
Ms. Friedman, Councillor Connors and Councillor Halpin both have a couple of questions. If we could continue.
Oh, absolutely.
So through you, Chair, I'm wondering, Ms. McDonald, is she still there?
I am, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm wondering, Ms. McDonald, if while you're conducting your daycare, have you ever muzzled a dog?
We have.
Could you elaborate?
If we have a dog that we cannot trust or that is new to socializing with other dogs, we would use a muzzle just to ensure that he didn't overreact, be overstimulated, and it would be a short period of time. We would do a little introduction in a small area, and we would do that probably over a good month before the dog would be unmuzzled.
And did this procedure apply to Elliot at any time?
Never.
And just to confirm, you did not see the incident. You weren't on the berm at the time of the incident. You heard the details from others, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Halpin, did you have a question?
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll reserve my question for Ms. Berry for later.
Thank you. Is the next witness ready, Ms. Friedman?
I think council needs to let her into the meeting. Judith Emery. I understand she's been trying to access the meeting without success.
She is there. I can see her on the screen. I can see her name.
See her now. Okay, great. Ms. Emery, can you turn on your camera if possible, please? Ms. Emery, can you hear me? I don't think we have audio. Ms. Emery, are you there? Not sure if anyone from the municipality can assist. It seems like there's some sort of technical issue.
Everything's on at our end.
While we're waiting, because I don't want to delay unnecessarily, I'm wondering about the witness restriction. Is there a witness restriction in terms of the number of witnesses in place?
It comes down to, will it give us further answers? Will allowing further questioning or other witnesses beyond the first two provide relevant or new information?
2. So now you're suggesting it's only 2 witnesses.
I'm just saying, like, we were waiting on the second one. So will allowing further questioning or other witnesses provide relevant or new information, Ms. Friedman?
Well, it's my perspective, and that's why I asked for a one-day hearing, that there were 13 letters that it was necessary in order to provide a defense and to provide this council, which is charged with making a decision here, with all of the relevant information in order to carry out its duty to provide a fair and impartial hearing. And by limiting witnesses, respectfully, you're not carrying out your duty. I don't want to use up limited time if there's going to be an issue here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this issue. I just wanted an answer from council. I see that there's a mute icon on Ms. Emery's image, so I'm hoping she's now available. Ms. Emery, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Are you able to turn on your camera, or is that an issue?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. For ease of all participants, there's a document I'm going to be referring to at page 55 of the appellant's book of documents. Ms. Emery, I understand that you prepared this letter dated April 10th, 2023. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. Oh.
Can you explain why you prepared the letter?
Sorry.
Ms. Emery, is there a chance that you may be logged into the Zoom meeting on 2 different devices?
I'm on one. Here, just a minute.
If you're logged in to Zoom on 2 different devices, you would just need to log out of the second or turn down the volume on your speakers.
Okay, is that better now?
It's much better.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. My apologies. I was contacted by Margaret. I wrote this letter in April because I was contacted by Margaret about this situation that had occurred with Elliot. And she asked if I would be able to write a letter in support of Elliot based on the work that I did with him last year.
Can you tell me about your animal physical therapy business?
Yeah, so I have been working in animal physical therapy since 2011 when I started my my certification. And I spent the last from 2014 or until present, I have been working as an animal physical therapist or rehabilitation therapist first at London Regional Vet and now at Oak West Animal Clinic. So with this, I'm doing physical therapy on both dogs and cats and other companion animals who've either had an injury or they've been through surgery or had an accident or have a congenital problem which affects their mobility. And I'm working closely with them to do treatments, exercises, and things just to help them get back to normal functioning as quickly as possible.
How many appointments did you have with Elliot?
I had 6 appointments with Elliot.
You elaborate upon the nature of your visits?
Yeah, so Elliot came to me because he had suffered bilateral cruciate injuries, which is a ligament in the knee that needed to be repaired. So he had 2 subsequent surgeries, and he came to me following the second surgery to help him to recover from these surgeries. And so the appointments consisted of doing a physical assessment, and that's both a visual as well as a palpation assessment of the dog to determine muscle mass, to determine their level of discomfort, to check and make sure that the repairs were stable. And so for that, it was getting in very close to him, doing a lot of touching and patting him, putting tape measures around his legs, which is getting awfully close to the groin, which some dogs get a little uncomfortable with, even playing or touching, a surgical site that can sometimes make dogs very nervous. And then also doing things like massage, heat, therapeutic laser, once again, being close to that surgical area. And then teaching exercises that he needed to do, teaching his owner how to do these at home. And then finally also getting him in an underwater treadmill, which is it's basically a plexiglass box with a treadmill at the bottom that fills with water. Doing that, I always go in with the animals the first few times, and I'm in there very, leaning right over them, very close to them. And there's not a lot of room to get out of the way if anything would go wrong.
And how would you describe his demeanor?
Elliot was a joy to work with. He was I'm going to use just the word enthusiastic. He was very chill whenever I had to do anything with him. So the palpation, touching, getting in close with him. I never had any concerns about how his response. He didn't make me nervous. And he was a lovely patient to work with. And I was sorry when the 6 sessions were done.
What aggressive tendencies did you observe from Elliot towards you?
None.
And what about toward others?
None.
And what about toward other animals?
So I am in the rehab unit with the dogs by themselves, but when he would get out of the car in the parking lot where we have a lot of dogs going back and forth, he really had no interest in the other dogs or any animal who was out there.
And there's a belief, including from one of the council members, that all large dogs are dangerous. What's your perspective on that?
So I've been in veterinary medicine for 25 years. I started as a kennel assistant in 1998. My big fear are the little dogs. My big fear are the Chihuahuas and the other dogs who have not been allowed to be dogs. I find that they're the ones who I have to be a lot more careful about, because a lot of times owners assume a little dog cannot cause damage, and they often just don't get the training they need, or they are treated like children, and it can make them a little bit, it can make them very unpredictable and difficult to work with. So I'm actually more scared of a Chihuahua than I am of a Mastiff.
Okay, and what about a Rottweiler like Elliot?
You know what, I have not had problems with Rottweilers that I've worked with. They're not a dog that I worry about, because usually, like, the owners know that they're a bigger dog. They put the time into them, and they tend to be very easy to work with.
And speaking of dog owners, how would you describe Miss Berry as a dog owner?
She's a great dog owner. You can see how much work she has put in with Elliot, and that the training with her is ongoing. She's always working with him. She doesn't let him get away with anything. If he, tried that, when we were doing exercises, she had him under control. She was doing them, and she maintains that control of Elliot at all times. I wish all my clients were like her.
And what danger does Elliot pose to the public?
I don't feel that Elliot does pose a danger to the public. Like I say, I have been in a box filling with water with that dog, and he just stood there and did it. I had no worry at all anytime I had to get in close to him. And that's if he can tolerate that in a vet clinic where he's already going to be a little more nervous. I don't have any concerns about him.
Okay. And my final question, in your professional opinion, why would it be unreasonable to have Elliot designated as a dangerous dog, including requiring him to wear a muzzle at all times while in public for the rest of his life?
Well, once I think it's been alluded to before, is that the muzzle is the muzzles can really affect their overheating. And my worry is that if he's wearing that muzzle, particularly in the summer, he's more likely to have heat distress, especially given he's a black dog and they do tend to get a little hotter. You have the worries about heat distress. So I, physically worry about that. I will tell you that in clinic, when we do use muzzles, we use them for as short a time as possible. We get them on, we do what we have to do with the dog, and we get them off again. And to me, for a dog to have to wear a muzzle for hours at a time is like I say, you're exposing him to possible physical harm, which is very concerning. And also, he is an emotional support dog, and there's also that perception issue as well, is that when you see a muzzle, you automatically think bad dog, and he is not a bad dog. I think there's just more to the situation than the decision was not based on full information about Elliot or what actually happened that day.
Thank you, Ms. Emery. Those are all my questions, but council may have some questions for you.
Council, do we have any questions for Ms. Emery? Councillor Halpin?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Emery. Ms. Emery, you spoke in sort of general terms about the natures of large dogs and small dogs. Could you talk to me about the nature of aggression and whether you find that dogs who aggress against other dogs are consistently aggressive toward people and vice versa?
I will tell you, I'm not a behavior expert. In my experience with aggression, generally there is a trigger for it. And you do, it's a really hard question. Like I say, I'm a rehab person. I'm not a behavior person, so I'm not sure how well I can answer that. But I will say, usually there's a trigger for it. And often it's a very significant thing that has happened, and it's not something that continues to happen over and over again. But, I always say, there's not bad dogs, there's bad owners. And, and often when you see a history of aggression with an animal, everyone I've seen who has the history is because they have not been trained properly, or the training they've had has not been reinforced.
Thank you. And again, through the chair to Ms. Emery, have you ever worked together with Elliot and another dog in the same time and place?
No, because that's not how our unit works. We see one animal at a time.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson?
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Mrs. Emery. Mrs. Emery, is there different types of muzzles that will still let dogs drink water or to pant to reduce their heat?
There are different types. You can get something called a basket muzzle, which is goes over the nose. The most familiar is if you've ever seen a racing greyhound, that's often what they wear. It looks like a wire cage. The problems with those is that they tend not to be as, I will say honestly, they tend not to be as secure on the dog.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as long as they can get some water, if they work and they're still classified as a muzzle, I'm glad to hear there's ones to help dogs like that. Thanks.
Any further questions? Councillor Watson?
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Mrs. Friedman. Just to be clear, I came here today with an open mind. I even went to look up some of the Ontario Dog Owners Liability Act, and I read through a whole lot of things. And just so you're aware, you said that I have a bias against large dogs. Those were not my words. My words were, I'll just paraphrase, I guess. I'm afraid of large dogs when they're running at me with a muzzle on and they knock down a grown man. I called that a dangerous dog. Thank you.
I appreciate what you have to say, Counselor. However, I maintain my position that that constitutes potentially not bias, but certainly a reasonable apprehension of bias. And I don't think it's appropriate, again, respectfully, that you are rendering a decision on this matter when you've made a bias very clear. With respect to the question that was just posed, I think I want to get into a question about muzzles that seems to be overlooked in this case. And perhaps I can ask Ms. Emery about this. Why would one put a muzzle on a dog who is neither aggressive nor reactive or has had no history of that kind of behavior?
You wouldn't. You know, there would be no reason to do that.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have. And if there are no further questions from council, I would like to go on to the next witness.
Ms. Friedman, I'd like to know that further questioning and other witnesses will provide relevant new information.
Are you asking me a question or making a statement?
I'm asking you a question. Will your next witness provide relevant and new information that we have not heard?
My responsibility to advocate on behalf of the appellant is to ensure that I raise fearlessly every issue on behalf of her and on behalf of Elliot, but also to ensure that this council has enough information in order to carry out its duty to make a fair and impartial decision. And it's my perspective that by council limiting witnesses, I'm not able to do so. So I can say with certainty that the information that you are going to be receiving and that I propose to present is relevant and important information. The next witness I'm proposing to call is the appellant, who I don't imagine would be counted within the witness restrictions, since she is actually the appellant. But I'm in limbo here, and respectfully, council has put us in this position because I still don't have an understanding of whether there's a cap, whether there's a duration on this hearing. I see that we're at 2:11. We started about an hour ago. Is council going to be ending this hearing in an hour, or is there more flexibility to continue? And respectfully, I think I ought to have an understanding so that I can prepare accordingly in terms of the appellant's witnesses, as well as planning the questioning of the municipal witnesses.
Ms. Friedman, we would like to have relevant new information relating to the specific incident.
For the purposes of the record, is council not prepared to answer the questions posed?
We've set a 2-hour time limit on this.
So this hearing will be concluding at exactly 3:13, irrespective of whether there's important evidence left to be heard.
That is my belief.
Okay, and again, for the purposes of the record, that amounts to a compelling basis for an appeal because council is clearly interfering with the appellant's right to present a defense. But on that basis, I'm not going to waste any more time, given that we have 61 minutes left and I have more than 61 minutes of information to go through. The next witness will be the appellant.
Continue.
Thank you. Ms. Berry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I understand you're the appellant in the matter and you are the owner of a Rottweiler named Elliot.
I am,
How long have you had Elliot?
since he was 8 weeks old, and he's 3.5 months now.
And why did you select a Rottweiler?
I had a Rottweiler before Elliot, and I loved her demeanor. And she was very easy to train, very accommodating in the house, and took no time at all to train her. And they're just really intelligent animals.
Can you describe the nature and scope of the puppy training that you enrolled Elliot in?
Well, we had some training with a group, not for very long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. What was it, Rover or something. I didn't like the way that they were training him because they were really into shock collars and that sort of thing, and I don't agree with that. So I left there, and then that's when I met Anne McDonald, and she became his trainer from there on out. I liked her methods of training, and he learned very quickly, and she got to know him easily, and he went on to go to daycare there. She helped us a great deal. It just made it a lot easier.
I'm going to draw your attention to some photographs that are part of the book of documents. And for ease of reference to all participants, it begins at page 77 of the book of documents. I'd like to take you through each of these photographs and describe what's illustrated in these images.
That image is when Elliot was at Brutus Quest, a daycare that was close to here, and he was there for a few months. It was St. Patrick's Day, so they were dressing him up, and the other dog behind, I don't know what they're doing with him. I don't think he had any costume stuff on, but anyway, Elliot loves to have his picture taken, so he would be very happy with that. Brutus Quest, as I said, is close to me here, and some of the collateral damage from this dangerous dog thing is that he lost his place at Brutus Quest because their insurance won't cover a dog being deemed a dangerous dog. So we had to leave there. So that's just the stuff that, people don't know about, don't think about when they put titles and restrictions on animals, unfounded ones.
And what, if any, concerns did the facility have prior to that?
None. They loved him. I can remember 2 or 3 times when they would go to get Elliot, they would say, it's so nice to have a well-mannered Rottweiler in the daycare, because generally people don't take the time to train them as well as you have. And they just loved him. Wherever he goes, they love him.
And what
This is his 3rd birthday party. We have friends come over, and my dear friend Pam, she has 2 big retrievers, and they come over and they party. And we had cake and hats and little dancing, the usual that one does for a dog party. They play a lot. Yeah. And this is him laying on the couch. He was a bit younger then, but that's pretty much his position, is being on the leather couch. He likes to watch TV. And that's him. He just gotten groomed, and they had a big tie around his neck. They like to do that. And this is him just laying on my bed. This is my friend Emily's granddaughter, and I think she's 8 or 9. I may have that wrong.
Ms. Friedman, can we get some information that's related to the specific incident?
You are getting some related information for this because you're seeing what a calm nature he has.
I'd like information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have the opportunity to understand his nature, and this little girl is 9 years old, and he plays with her on the floor. So, that's not an aggressive dog.
If I may, council member or chair, I'm not sure who was lodging that question. The duty here is to determine whether there are mitigating factors. It's the responsibility of this council to evaluate mitigating factors. We are presenting you with mitigating factors. This respectfully is a clear example of a mitigating factor. When you have a young child on her own right beside Elliot with no fear whatsoever that there'll be any sort of aggression, and that there hasn't been any aggression, it's incumbent upon this council to consider the history of this dog in relation to determining whether it should rescind this dangerous dog order by simply indicating that we are going to rely on the self-serving evidence of Nick's dog owners and nothing else. I'm wondering why this council is refusing to hear other relevant information. This is important to making a fair and impartial decision.
Ms. Friedman, we're here to designate or not designate the dog, and we need information relating to the specific incident. We're
And
not
I-
looking to the past, the history of the dog. You're showing us a lot of stuff. We're just here to make a determination on the incident.
You want to make a determination without any context whatsoever. You want to limit the amount of information that you're receiving so that you can just focus on the account of Nick's owners. Is that how, am I clear in how you're trying to evaluate this situation? Because
Our biggest question is, did the alleged dangerous dog significantly injure a domestic animal? And that's what we're here to determine.
And we're here to demonstrate that that did not happen. And the way to determine that is to assess all evidence, including circumstantial evidence, including a past history of no aggression with adults, with children, with other dogs. If this council is refusing to hear that highly pertinent information, it really renders this whole proceeding moot. If this council has already decided that it is prepared to continue with a confirmation without hearing evidence. And I'm just respectfully, I'm astounded, and I've never experienced this in multiple dangerous dog proceedings where council continues to interfere with the right of the appellant to lead evidence. This dangerous dog designation has far-reaching consequences for both Elliot and the appellant. And I'm not sure why, aside from limiting the matter to 2 hours, council is further limiting the evidence and compromising the ability to launch a defense and to provide this council with relevant information.
Ms. Friedman, I'm now going to ask council if they are going to allow any more information based on whether it's new or relevant as we go forward. Council, or do we want to go forward with continued information? Councillor Halpin, you have a question.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I've planned for additional time so that if there's a sufficient quorum, we can go beyond 3 if all of the witnesses are relevant matters. But I do think that if we're going to continue with this, we should define mitigating factor, because our bylaw does define it as a circumstance which excuses the aggressive behavior that has occurred. And I can't understand how baby photos of a dog mitigate or excuse an event which has occurred. So if the witnesses are legitimate presentations of mitigating factor, then I very much want to hear from them. But if they are personal history, that's different.
With due respect, council member, you have incorrectly interpreted the definition of mitigating factor. And maybe this needs to be something that your legal counsel considers and you get the assistance of your legal counsel, but that's not how mitigating factor is to be interpreted. And certainly mitigating factor has a definition in your bylaw, but it means a circumstance which excuses behavior and without limiting the generality of the foregoing may include. May is a word that is non-exhaustive, which means the list that follows is not a comprehensive list, which means other factors may be considered. And what excuses a dog is something that will defend, justify, or lessen blame. Most assuredly, the interactions with other individuals, including children, will explain to this panel why blame should be lessened in the circumstances. But it's up to council. You have the jurisdiction here to determine what evidence you will hear and what evidence you will not hear. I don't want to exhaust the remaining 50 minutes going back and forth on what evidence is going to be heard. If you're not prepared to look at information relating to his history, then we can move on from there, and I will indicate for the purposes of the record that's a ground for appeal. But I just need to get a definitive answer.
Mr. Loeb, you had comment?
Good afternoon, Ms. Friedman. I'm legal counsel to the tribunal. You can see me slightly on camera. I think I'm off to the bottom right there. So my comment is largely rendered moot by Ms. Friedman's last comments. I think council's fine to proceed. What I was going to indicate was that Councillor Halpin was reading directly from the definition of mitigating factor in the bylaw when she made her comments, but I don't find that to be in any way in conflict with what Ms. Friedman is saying. Ms. Halpin's point was she's looking for information which excuses aggressive behavior. And I think everyone's on the same page that that should be the evidence going forward.
Respectfully, I'm still unclear as to whether you're going to allow this evidence in or not. And that's what I was looking for from the outset, is a decision on whether this is going to be allowed or not.
Ms. Friedman, I'd like you to move along to the actual incident and have specific information relating to that incident.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
for the purposes of the record, the only information you'll be hearing from Ms. Berry is in relation to the specific incident. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ms. Berry, can you indicate to me what was going on the day before there was an altercation with Nick?
Sure. Yeah,
Give
there's
knowledge.
there is, I don't know whether this is the appropriate time to say it, but I am going to say it anyway. Ms. Halpin mentioned something about a second incident on the beach. I have no idea what that's about. I have never even been on Little Beach, if that's the beach that you're talking about. And I haven't been on the other beach as well. So I have no idea what that's about. If there was an incident, it certainly wasn't my dog, since we've never been on Little Beach. I find that very upsetting that you would bring that up in the third hearing. That has never been brought up. It is not in the disclosure at all. So I have a little problem with that. What happened that day?
Councillor Halpin's just going to speak to that quickly, Ms. Berry.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Berry. I didn't mean to blindside you with that. It was in an email that was presented to us by your lawyer, Ms. Friedman. I have an email here that was exchanged between yourself and Mr. Gremenprez, I apologize, that says, just so that you are aware, because the last part of your previous email sounds like a different incident entirely, the incident that this designation is based on is the February 5th incident that occurred on the grasslands beside Little Beach. So that was why I wondered whether there had been other incidents that Elliot was involved in, or whether the person who mentioned the berm was describing the correct incident to what is going on here. And I wanted to be sure that we are all talking about the same incident and that all of the witnesses are as well.
Of course we are. because I don't know anything about the other incident. So I don't know what, I can't respond to it because I don't know what it is. So the day of the incident, Elliot and I were out on the berm. We frequently go to the berm because that's one of the places where he did his rehab, so he's quite familiar with it. And we were walking around. Because of his social nature, the couple came up beside us, like sort of off to my left, and Elliot was running about quite a distance from me. And when I saw them, I called for him, but he was so excited to think that he had a playmate that he was trotting over to them. They say in their disclosure that it was a full-on run. It wasn't. He was trotting over because he wants to play. And when I called him a couple of times. When he got over there, they said to me afterwards that their dog growled and snapped at Elliot. They told me that because I certainly wasn't close enough to see that. So whatever took place, it was maybe 5 seconds, and they started screaming, and the lady, I don't know her name, I'm sorry, ran towards me and was screaming and saying, my dog is sick, he's going to die in 2 weeks, and now your dog has bit him. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what she was saying. And so anyway, she's still screaming and very upset, and I don't blame her one bit. I would be upset too. And so I started to walk towards them, and the man part of the team told me to stop. And in his story, he talks about how I zoomed away. Well, I'm almost 75 years old and I don't do a lot of zooming. So I don't know where that came from. I stood stock still when he told me to stop coming towards them. She ran back to the little group and they left. And that was the last I heard of it until they showed up on my doorstep. I guess a week later, maybe, I'm not sure. At any rate, apparently they got on Facebook, and since no one pays attention to the privacy laws in Canada, someone gave them my name and address. So I have a couple young people standing on my doorstep, and Elliot ran out the door because that's what he does, because he wants to meet everybody, thinks everybody's here to see him, and they helped me put him back in the house. And I came back to the door, and they told me what had happened. And the young lady was very sweet, actually. She was very apologetic for screaming at me, said that it was not the right thing to do, but and how sorry she was. And then the man part of the team starts to get very aggressive and starts threatening that if I don't pay the bill, then they're going to report me. So he said I got defensive. You bet. I live alone. I'm a widow. I live alone with my dog. And when there's a couple of people, one that I don't know, particularly a young man, is threatening me, I'm uncomfortable. So anyway, I took the bill. I asked him how he wanted me to pay. And I e-transferred him that night $1,200. And I mean, if Elliot hurt him, then of course it's my responsibility to pay the bill. I have no problem with that at all. So I did that. And again, the young woman was still apologizing for her behavior, and she was apologizing for sneaking up on me. And then the next thing I hear or know is that I get a notice stuck to my front door. I'm out of the country, and they had said that they would not report anything to anybody if I paid. I paid, and so they extorted the money out of me and went ahead and did what they did anyway. So that the next thing I hear is that I have a dangerous dog and he can't go anywhere. He has to be muzzled. I'm out of the country, and I asked for an extension, which I didn't get, of course. And here we are today.
Can you explain to me when they showed up at your door and said that you had to pay $1,200, what patient history did they provide to you showing you that
Nothing.
was the reason for the veterinary invoice?
All I got was the invoice. That's all I got, was just what they did, what the doctor did, but no, no description of the wound, no description. And I still to this day don't know, but the boy part of the group said there were multiple wounds. The girl said there was a wound. And the mother, who was not there at all, knows nothing, kind of agrees with it all. So I still don't know. It looked to me on the picture like it was a scratch. Elliot has really long nails and it looked like a scratch to me. But if you tell me it was a puncture wound, I have nothing to go on. I just paid the bill.
And so what significant injury, as is required by the bylaw, did you see?
I just saw the picture.
And what evidence did you receive from the municipality to support that there was any injury?
Nothing.
What veterinary information did you receive from the canine control officer?
Nothing. He never spoke to me. Only on email, because I was upset because I was out of the country and I felt that I had abandoned my dog because he was in trouble. So it was a lousy vacation. It was 3 days into my vacation. Sorry, I'm sorry. 1 day.
What previous interactions, if any, did Nick have with Elliot?
Previous? Nothing.
And when this all unfolded, what was the response of Nick? Was he on the ground or was he in
Yes.
distress?
He was on the ground. He was on a leash. And what I saw was that they were just standing there and they were yelling and screaming, which you just don't do around dogs. I mean, you have to keep control. And there was a lot of noise, and I don't blame Nick for snapping because he wasn't feeling well. And so Elliot wouldn't know that, nor did I know that. And when he snapped and growled at Elliot, he retaliated. That's what dogs do. But, I have to go back to what Anne said. And if Elliot wanted to create damage, he could, and he didn't.
And what incidents have you had with Elliot in the past in terms of demonstrating any sort of purportedly aggressive tendencies?
No, not reportedly. No. I can remember when we were at Anne's, and she warned me that there was a female dog up on the lawn that was on a leash. And she said, just be careful, just keep walking. And the female dog went crazy. And Elliot just stood there. And I was continuing to walk. And I somehow, I don't know how I got tangled up in the leash, but he just still didn't do anything. And he went towards the dog, but he wasn't trying to fight with her. I think he was more trying to calm her down than anything. And then at that point, it was over. There was a lot of people around and they separated her from Elliot. That's about the only time I've ever seen him really aggress, in some sort of an argument from another dog. Play fight all the time, but that's just play fighting. Because dogs do that too.
And what, if any, information have you received from groomers, the vet, or caregivers about aggressive tendencies?
None. Heather is his pet sitter. When I go away for a piece of 4 or 5 hours or something, she'll come in and sit with him for an hour, play with him, let him out, that sort of thing. She takes him for walks. She plays with him on the floor. Emily, I don't know if Emily can hear us. She actually, after Elliot's surgery, had to come here because I had to go away to see my daughter. And she stayed with him for 2 nights and 3 days. And he was on all kinds of medication, painkillers, antibiotics, all kinds of stuff. And she hand fed him, because that was the only way we could feed him at that time, and gave him all his pills and never had a problem with him. So I don't know what to say. I mean, my friend Pam keeps them at her house and she has 2 big dogs. They come here, they play in the house, outside, all over the place. Denny's house is on the line here today, and we go and walk in the woods with her anxiety ridden poor little dog. She's half the size of Elliot, and they walk nicely together. Soon as he met her, he sensed that she was anxious, licked her face, and away they went. So, and he does that every time he sees her. And they used to, I know it at Ann's, they used to put him in with dogs that were sort of timid so that he could bring them out of the shell. And they knew that he wouldn't attack or anything. They love him at Country Paws. He's there now. And he is in a house. They have 2 sorts of daycare. One is a daycare, kennel sort of thing. And then they have a house where they roam free in this house. And there could be as many as 10 to 15 dogs in there. And they have supervision, of course, but they just roam the house. I mean, it's got couches and beds and TVs and all that stuff. And he goes in there once a week. He goes to the house once a week and the kennels 2 times a week because he needs to be around other dogs. And there's just me here with him. So he needs that socialization.
And so that was a new routine after he wasn't permitted because
right.
of the insurance.
Correct. Yes.
And what, if any, complaints have you received?
None. I have a report card that I sent you that talks about how he did in the house the first time, because they have to be there for 4 hours before they can determine whether or not he can be in the house, that he's quiet enough and well organized enough with himself that he can be in that house. And he got nothing but rave reviews.
Why is Elliot not a dangerous dog?
Because he's well trained and he's not dangerous. He's so overly friendly, I'll tell you that. If I could take some of that out of him, I would, but I don't know how to do that. He thinks everybody is his friend and he thinks everybody comes to the house to see him. So I don't know how that's a whole lot better than the opposite, I think.
And there was some question regarding his status as an emotional support.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't. Well, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. The first time I got it, it was, they did a little bit of evaluation of me and then of him. And then COVID hit and we weren't going anywhere anyway. And it costs $200 American. So I thought, well, I'll just wait until we can actually go places again and reinstate it, because nobody was flying and nobody was visiting and I wasn't moving houses. So I didn't do it. And then I went back and had it done now again because we're out and about like everybody else.
And what impact does that have on your life? I know you've been adhering to this dangerous dog designation, including the muzzle order.
I think what worries me the most is that anybody who knows anything about support animals, they know you better than you know yourself. And when I get anxious, which is the reason he is my support dog, I have a lot of anxiety and he senses that. He knows that. And if he has a muzzle on, he's not going to be able to smell the same sorts of odors that come off of me because your hormones change, you sweat, all of that stuff. And he knows that. And so if he's wearing a muzzle, he can't do that. Plus, I think when you muzzle animals, first of all, it gives the public an awful idea of what they're like. And secondly, I think that you always run the risk of them being aggressive after that. That's what worries me.
I have many, many more questions for you, but council has precluded me from asking those questions. I will just ask you one final question, which is why you think council should rescind this dangerous dog designation based on what unfolded on the subject date and based on his demeanor generally.
Can you say the first part of that to me again, please?
Why should council rescind the dangerous dog order? Why did you make this appeal? And they
Yes.
precluded the evidence relating to the past history and the interactions with other dogs and with people. So based just on this incident alone,
Yes.
why would it be appropriate, in your opinion, to rescind the dangerous dog order?
Well, Elliot and I are very affectionate with each other, and that's one of the reasons why people can work with him, because I am always touching him. I'm a face petter. One of the reasons the vet has no problem with him is because I maul him constantly. We show each other affection. And if he has a muzzle on, he won't be able to do that. It'll make people think that he is a cross dog, and he just downright doesn't deserve it. He's not an aggressive dog. I totally agree with muzzling an aggressive dog. It's just not him. And if you knew him, if they had talked to me, I invited the bylaw officer to come over to the house and meet Elliot, meet me. But he, of course, didn't. But there's no reason for Elliot to be considered a dangerous dog. And if he puts a muzzle on, everybody's going to think he's a dangerous dog, and they will treat us both differently. And that's not fair.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I'm allowed to ask you at this point. Perhaps council will have some further questions for you.
Councillor Halpin, you have a question?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Berry. Was Elliot leashed at the time of your incident?
No, it says that very clearly, and I stated that very clearly. He was not leashed. That's my
Thank you.
doing.
So, Ms. Berry, I'd like to follow that up. I do see that you have a letter about your emotional support needs, and the person who wrote that letter for you does indicate that both you and she understand that emotional support animals must be leashed.
Mhm.
Do you feel that Elliot is safe if you are not taking measures to make him a safe dog?
Well, whether he's on the leash or off the leash, in my mind, has never made him an unsafe dog. He runs all over the place. We go out on long hiking trails and that sort of thing, and he's not leashed there. No, if you had agreed to look at more of my evidence, you would have seen that most people up until this incident take their dogs to the berm and let them run, because that's what they need to do. And apparently what I'm hearing now is that the bylaw officer is sitting down there watching everybody and threatening fines if the dogs are not leashed. That was the place to go, because Port Stanley does not accommodate dogs. There is but I took up a petition with over 75 names here to get a dog park. Sally Martin agreed to give her land, and no one has done anything about it. So people are improvising, but apparently now, because of this, you have stopped that. And there's no harm in the berm at all. I mean, there's nothing there except a bunch of very dirty geese. And people do it all the time. As you can see by this picture, there's people with their dogs, and the dogs are off leash, running in the water, swimming in the water, and there's never been an issue.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. If Elliot had either been muzzled or on a leash, would it have been possible when he wanted to initiate play with a non-consenting dog for him to bite it?
No, of course not. Well, maybe if he was just on a leash, but if he's got a muzzle on, I think he can bite, can he? Jennifer?
Just if I may, the evidence of the appellant is not that he bit this dog. The evidence is from the complainant that Elliot bit this dog. We have no evidence whatsoever, no objective evidence. There's no veterinary records. There's nothing to connect the dots between an altercation between Nick and Elliot and the photographs of Elliot and a purported bite.
Ms. Friedman, may I continue? I do have a few more questions, and if we are going to talk about objective evidence, you have given specific outlines of events to witnesses to speak to us about. So I think it would be fair for us to be able to get through this and hear from the appellants as well, or the complainants as well. But
I appreciate that, but I need to correct the record because that was an inaccurate statement of the evidence.
That's right. Yep.
okay. Ms. Friedman or Ms. Berry, do you have specific evidence that a muzzle would make it impossible for a dog to smell and therefore understand hormones?
Of course I don't, but I bet you that I could find some if I spoke to an animal behaviorist, but I don't think Anne could probably speak to that, but I don't know that I need to produce that. That is my opinion, that he would not be able to. You don't see very many service dogs, particularly dogs that are with people because they're diabetic or they have epilepsy, those sorts of things. They all need to be able to smell. That's how they live their lives.
Thank you. And my last question is, I see that your healthcare professional has reasserted your need for a support dog. Has your healthcare professional reevaluated Elliot himself and his levels of safety and behavioral training?
No, they have not, but I give them the same evidence that I give you. And I have Anne McDonald, who routinely talks to me and sees Elliot. The last time we had a hearing, she had seen him like 2 or 3 days before that and assessed him with her dogs and the dogs that are at her daycare. So it's the best, I think she's probably the best determinant of that.
Ms. Friedman, do you have any more witnesses or specific questioning to the incident?
I have more witnesses. Council is refusing to allow them, but I also.
To the specific incident is what I was asking.
If council is confining it only to witnesses who actually saw the alleged incident, then I don't. I do have evidence which I believe is important to the council's ability to render a fair decision, but I do not want to be limited by the ability to question.
Okay, if you don't have any more to the specific incident, then I'm going to, since you've had a chance to speak to these situations, I'm going to ask that our canine control officer or municipal representative provide testimony or introduce evidence. Mr. Grimm-Press.
Thank you. Everything that I've gathered throughout the investigation of this incident was included in my report to council and has been disclosed to Ms. Berry as well as the complainant. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have, but I don't have anything new to introduce today.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for Mr. Grimm-Press? No? And any interested parties or representatives, would they like to provide evidence or make a submission?
I have questions for Mr. Grimm-Press.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'd like to draw your attention to the order that you issued. And for ease of reference, I'll bring it up on the screen as part of our package of materials. It's for ease of reference at pages 32 to 33. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm really unclear. I've never actually seen an order like this before where it's simply paste an excerpt from the bylaw. So which requirements actually apply? Is the appellant to choose which ones apply, or do they all apply? Because this order says or, as opposed to these are the following requirements that you are supposed to follow.
Each of the listed requirements on that order are applied to all dangerous or potentially dangerous dog scenarios.
Why is the or still in the order?
That is how it appears in our bylaw, so it is quoted directly from the definition of dangerous or potentially dangerous.
But you recognize that it's not stated that way in the order. It's stated that these are the, this is the provision, but it doesn't specifically say in this circumstance whether all of them apply or just some of them apply.
That's the way it was presented.
Okay, I'm just putting it out there that it's a confusing order. It doesn't specifically say which the requirements are. It simply indicates what the provision is. And in the first sentence of this order, you indicate that you've conducted a fair and impartial inquiry and investigation. Do you see that?
Yes.
What does fair mean to you?
It means I gathered the appropriate evidence that was available to me and made a determination based on that evidence.
And what does impartial mean?
That I didn't have bias in the investigation.
So how do you reconcile that you didn't have bias when you didn't even ask the dog owner for her version of what unfolded?
The information that I gathered through speaking with the complainant through 3 different witness statements, I determined that the information provided met the definition within our bylaw to designate the dog as dangerous. The point of an appeal is so that after the designation is done, it can go in front of council and then they can determine based on all of the evidence if they believe the designation has merit or not.
So let's break that up a bit. That's quite an astounding statement. So you say that you got 3 accounts. You'd agree that they're effectively the same account, although they weren't consistent. There's the 3 dog owners, a parent, and then the in-law and the child who were looking after Nick at the time. Is that right?
Yes.
So they effectively, again, with some inconsistent statements, which should give this council pause, have the same account. And so you've relied on just that before even contacting the dog owners. Is that right?
The information that I was going off of was that a dog was off of a leash, which is against our bylaw, and another dog was on a leash following our bylaw when the dog that was on leash was bitten or allegedly bitten by another dog causing damage, which is the exact definition in our bylaw to designate a dog as dangerous.
Well, I would, and I'll take you through your bylaw. I would disagree that that's the exact definition because it's not, but I want to get back to this whole impartial. So you're going to stand for the position that getting just the account of the complainant is impartial.
I believe I was impartial in my investigation and I stand by what I found in my investigation and the actions I took based on that.
Okay. So just as an example, there was a 2021 dangerous dog hearing involving a colleague of yours, and he referenced an impartial investigation to include speaking with the dog owner and going to her home. Are you aware of that situation?
That was not a colleague of mine. I did not work here at that point.
A former employee of the municipality? So his perspective was, for it to be impartial, he needed to speak to the dog owner, correct?
I believe that each designation is different. And as such, each investigation is different. So I believe the definition of that would change from incident to incident.
So from your perspective, some bylaw officers need to speak to both parties, but in your situation, you don't.
The information, as I said, that I gathered throughout this investigation led me to the determination that it met the specific outlines of our bylaw to be designated as dangerous, which is what I did.
Okay, and so again, you felt it appropriate to do that without getting both sides of the story.
As I said, the information that I gathered in this investigation led me to the determination that I made.
I'm not asking you a complicated question, and I will keep asking it again. From your perspective, in this incident, you felt you could conduct an impartial investigation without getting both versions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you feel it's okay to issue a dangerous dog owner, issue a dangerous dog designation that is not the subject of a stay, and an individual is required to adhere to all of those conditions until an appeal. Is that right?
Yes.
And so instead of the alternate situation of giving the dog owner an opportunity to give their version of events, you figure it's a more just option to just issue the designation.
Ms. Friedman, I believe that that was council's decision to stay that.
If I may, that's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, the witness specifically indicated that an appellant can bring this before council to make a determination. What I'm asking is, why not get both versions before issuing in haste a dangerous dog designation? Because perhaps if you get the second version, you might not issue the designation.
So I believe we're here today to determine that.
What veterinary evidence did you gather?
None.
And so there's no way, other than the self-serving evidence of Nick's owners, there's no way for you to actually definitively say that Elliot caused an injury.
Based on the pictures that were provided to me, which were included in the disclosure, I believe, in my opinion, it's pretty clear that damage was done. And based on a conversation with your client afterwards, it is very clear that she isn't denying that fact that her dog did the damage to Nick.
Oh, that's what I'm told.
Okay, so now you're imputing evidence that you didn't have. We're talking about evidence before the designation. So I'm trying to understand, based on the information that you gathered, which, and maybe you can point to me because I don't see it, where is there evidence, for example, a patient record that says that this photo was caused by a dog bite?
Ms. Friedman, I don't think anybody disputed the fact that there was the allocation and Elliot bit Nick. Nobody's disputing that, so I don't know why we're spending time on this issue.
We specifically dispute that.
Pardon?
And it's baffling to me that you're making that statement respectfully. We dispute that. There is no evidence that this was caused by a bite. There is a photograph that has some sort of wound. There was no veterinary evidence to say where the wound came from and what the wound is. Is it a bite? Is it a scratch? our expert here today indicated that that to her looked like a scratch, and
So-
that Elliot had bit this dog, then it would be clear. So there's no evidence that
Ms. Friedman, I do not believe Miss Barry disputed that. She was there when it happened. She
that's
said
not
it
correct.
happened.
That's not correct. She was not present when the dogs made contact with each other. I'm actually troubled that there's a source of confusion here. And by limiting the appellant and precluding a lot of questions, I think stuff has been lost in the evidence here, because it was made very clear, and I'll make it clear again. And my client, I'm sure, would be happy to restate this, that the dogs made contact with one another, potentially, but the precursor was that Nick, not Elliot, Nick snarled, growled, bit. And those are included in the definition of mitigating factors in your bylaw to excuse potentially aggressive behavior. There was no evidence from Miss Barry that she witnessed a bite happen. She rushed, and again, given her age, the description of how quickly she got there was not necessarily accurate, but she made her way as quickly as possible, and there was a 5-second altercation. There has been no evidence other than from the complainants, again, which is self-serving, that this was a bite. And the investigating officer did not take it upon himself, which I find astounding, to seek veterinary evidence to be able to connect those dots. All we're left with right now is
Do we have any further questions for Mr. Grimm-Prez?
Yes, I have many. May I proceed?
Sure.
So you said, Mr. Grimm-Prez, that you looked at this photograph and you took it upon yourself to determine that this was a dog bite. Is that right?
No, that is not what I said.
So what did you say based on the photograph?
I said based on the photograph and the other information that I gathered throughout the investigation, that it appears to be a dog bite. I did not say it was, I said appears to be.
So it's possible that it's not.
Yes.
Okay. And based on the fact that you don't have veterinary evidence, you can't say definitively that it was a bite.
I can't say definitively one way or another. I can't say that it definitively is a bite, but I can't say that it is definitively not a bite.
And you can't say definitively that it was a significant injury.
It appears to be a significant injury from my perspective. As I said, I'm not an expert in animal injuries, but there appears to be a puncture wound and blood. So I would classify that as a significant injury.
What does significant mean to you?
An injury that causes damage.
An injury that causes damage. I don't understand. Can you clarify?
Any injury or attack that causes damage to another dog or person, I would consider significant.
So what's a minor injury?
One that does not cause damage.
Sorry, who answered that question?
Deputy Mayor Noble.
So are you now the person answering questions? I'm confused what's going on here.
The question was not answered, so I thought I would speak up and answer the question for you, Ms. Friedman.
Well, I'm actually asking the canine control officer who made this designation. Respectfully, I think it's highly inappropriate for counsel to speak for a witness.
Please continue.
This is a significant point, that this is not a significant injury, and I'm trying to assess gauge from this witness how he's decided that this is a significant injury. And it doesn't seem to me that there's an understanding of the difference between one injury versus another.
Do you have more questions, Ms. Friedman, that we could move on to?
Are you a licensed veterinarian?
Are you talking to me?
No, I'm talking to the witness.
Oh, okay.
No,
Are you an animal behaviorist?
no,
Are you a master dog trainer?
no,
Do you have an animal science degree?
no,
Have you taken any courses on determining wounds, assessing wounds, evaluating wounds?
no.
And you'd agree that the evidence that you received from the complainants acknowledges that the dog Nick engaged in behavior toward Elliot prior to Elliot engaging in behavior toward Nick?
Can you clarify what you mean by behavior?
Sure. Snarl, growl, nip.
I don't believe it says anywhere in the statements, and from my conversations with the complainant, anywhere where it says Nick bit, but it does say that he growled at Elliot
And snarled.
after Elliot approached him off leash.
And so snarl or growl could be encompassed by tease, provoke, or torment, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Are there any other interested parties or representatives to provide evidence and or make submissions? Please approach the podium. You state your name and your address for the record.
Michelle Cortez, 228 Colonel Bostwick Street, Port Stanley, Ontario.
Please continue.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for taking this seriously. This is not self-serving for me. I have no skin in this game. I'm doing this for my community so that other animals do not get attacked by dogs off leash. Just so we're clear on that, Ms. Friedman. So on that date, I was not there. I was also on holidays. My children were watching Nick, and our dog does not go out without being off leash. That is the bylaw. We abide by the laws. Not knowing the bylaws is not ignorance of the law, as they say. My dog was on leash. Her dog was off leash. Her dog came running. She was 200 meters away, nowhere near where her dog was running towards our dog. She did not see what happened, in my opinion. And the kids did not sneak up behind her. Her testimony so far has been false. Everything she's said is not exactly what happened at all. Especially according to the statements, if you are to read them. So to me, that is, I'm very flustered and I'm sorry, just because I'm very upset about this, how much time this has taken, and that my dog was attacked needlessly. If her dog was just on the leash, none of this would have happened and this could have all been prevented. So how I found out about Ms. Berry's address is I posted pictures of my dog that where he was punctured and bitten and needed stitches. And I do have a vet report, which she saw, witnessed, and paid for the bill, admitting that her dog had actually bit Nick. I actually have a taped recording of that conversation. I asked my daughter to record that conversation since I was away in Mexico trying to enjoy my holiday, which I found out that my dog was attacked. What was I saying here? I forget where I was. I'm so sorry. The point is that her dog was off leash. My dog was not. My dog was bit. I have a veterinary's report. I went onto Facebook to find out who could possibly have done this. And many residents of our community told me that it was this lady. This is where she lives. Incidences had happened before. But no one's come forward because they were kind of scared of this lady because she's kind of like the mean one in the neighborhood. And this is what people have told me. So that's when I gave my children the address and told them if you could go and check and see if this is the lady, ask her to pay this vet bill that she has to pay for since her dog bit my dog and she's responsible for those injuries. Which she admitted she did. She paid the bill. Can't understand if your dog didn't bite somebody, why would you pay a bill? Number one, that makes no sense to me. And that's pretty much my case. It makes no sense to me, this long drawn out procedure. She said, I said, I have no skin in the game. This is not self-serving for me. I'm protecting the rest of the community from dogs that are potentially dangerous and dangerous. When you bite a dog, that's all it needs. Dogs are dogs and they are going to bite. Whether my dog snarled at her or not makes no difference. She had not control of her dog. And apparently, and no one else does that has their dogs off leash on that berm, which they should. Those are the laws. Those are the rules. People have to follow those rules. There's plenty of dog parks where you can run your dogs off leash in St. Thomas and elsewhere. That's where you should take your dog if you want to run them off leash. But this dog should be on leash at the very least. So anyways, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Do any members of council have a question? Councilor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michelle, for your testimony. But this is a question to our legal counsel and to Mrs. Friedman. Does Mrs. Berry admit guilt by paying this vet bill then? That's what I'd like to get answered by both legal counsels here. Has she admitted guilt? And yes, and I would like to see, do we have a copy of the vet bill? Just to make sure. I'd like to see that in the future date. Thank you.
I have no copy of the vet bill. I have no copy of patient record, and that ought to have been provided and that ought to have been included by the canine control officer, and it wasn't. In terms of your question, I'm happy to answer that. I do have a lot of questions for this witness because there was a lot of erroneous information provided.
Excuse me, just one moment, Ms. Friedman, please. I did submit the vet bill before this hearing a few weeks ago.
That bill wasn't provided to me, and it is required piece of disclosure that was never provided to the appellant. In terms of whether the appellant accepts responsibility, absolutely not. Again, it may have been clouded because we were rushed through the evidence, but she made it very clear that she felt threatened by this situation and that these two individuals showed up at her door unannounced, and she's a single lady, and she was in a vulnerable position. She does have a documented disability. This exacerbated her anxiety, and they specifically extorted her and said, pay this bill and we won't get you in trouble with the municipality. By no way is she admitting that this unfolded by paying the money. She was trying to de-escalate a situation where people were at her doorstep, and she took them at her word because it was in the heat of the moment. But it's been made very clear today and through the documentation with Ms. Leach, numerous communication.
Thank you for answering the question, Ms. Friedman. I'll reach out to our counsel, Mr. Loeb, to answer our version of the question.
So I think that's better served at the end of the hearing in closed session advice. I just from a practical perspective, I don't think it makes sense to go into closed session right now to discuss that. I think you should conclude the evidence of the hearing and then we could have a closed session for legal advice at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Loeb. Does any other member of council have questions for Michelle? Seeing none,
I have questions for her.
go ahead, Ms. Friedman.
Thank you. You've indicated that you have no skin in the game, but you'd agree you're the owner of Nick, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
What would I
And-
have to gain? What would I have to gain, Ms. Friedman?
Well, it's hard to reconcile those two statements. You have no skin in the game, but you're the dog owner. So you most assuredly have skin in the game.
But what would I have to gain from coming forth and presenting this? I have nothing to gain.
Well,
So that's not self-serving.
there seems to be, and I'm the one asking the questions here, that's how this works, but there seems to be this perspective, and I don't know if there's some sort of animosity, but you've given a clear opinion about your perspective of the personality of the appellant, who, by the way, is an upstanding member of the community who gives back enormously through her volunteer work. But
I'm sure she is.
We're not getting into that. The question really is, and the council is here to render a decision on this designation, and it specifically asked to hear evidence of those who actually witnessed the incident. So to this end, I'm actually surprised that council was willing to hear your evidence, as you'd agree that you did not witness the incident.
As neither did your witnesses.
You'd agree that you did not witness the incident, is that correct?
That is
Point
correct.
of privilege, Ms. Friedman. We do have the right to have an efficient meeting here. You have brought forward multiple witnesses that did not actually see anything and were giving us conjecture about what had happened. It's not fair for you to expect that she should not be allowed to explain something that she has also heard. And it's not fair for you to make us listen to you argue about it.
Thank you for that. I did not bring forward multiple witnesses. One witness was declared an expert, to which council asked questions. And again, this is evidence that is always in front of a council or administrative tribunal. I've never seen a situation where council refuses to hear this type of evidence. In terms of this particular witness, you were not present. We've established that. And you've never met this particular dog, namely Elliot, in the past. Is that right?
Correct.
And you're not a veterinarian?
No.
And you're not a dog trainer?
No.
You're not a dog behaviorist?
No.
And you've never had any training or certification on evaluating dog injuries?
Correct. But I have children and I know the difference between an injury that requires stitches and doesn't. You don't need to be an expert for that.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that one, because certainly a veterinarian would have a different perspective. Those are all the questions I have for this witness.
Thank you. Any members of council have any questions for the parties for clarification through the chair? Seeing none, we will give time for rebuttal evidence, and it will be permitted where necessary in the opinion of council. Does council have any rebuttal evidence that they'd like to share? Receive. Yeah. Okay. Do any members of council or any other members of public have any comments or questions? Councillor Halpin.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Friedman. You've asked every person who was not a witness of your own selection whether they were a veterinarian. Is Anne McDonald a veterinarian?
No, she is not, but you, as part of council, have designated her as an expert witness. So I'm wondering why you're now challenging her qualification.
Through the chair to Ms. Friedman, we have accepted her as an expert behaviorist witness. Do you consider that a behaviorist with photos of an injury has better knowledge of it than a veterinarian who has administered stitches to that injury?
No, and I also would say to any veterinarian, period. But certainly if you're looking, and I would expect that this council is looking for pertinent evidence, that you would be interested to find out the background for people who are trying to suggest that the injuries were of a certain extent. And you have one individual who this council has declared as an expert witness, and her evidence should be considered or weighed much higher than the evidence of the lay witnesses. And that's well settled law. And I'm sure your legal counsel will agree that the evidence of an expert witness should be weighed heavily in relative to the lay witnesses.
Ms. Friedman, as a legal counselor yourself, is it your opinion that a person who is an expert witness on one point within a case is therefore an expert on all aspects of the case?
She is designated as an expert, and she was asked questions in relation to her expertise.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Yes, through you, Chair, to Miss Barry. Mark, do you think you made a mistake that day by not having your dog on a leash?
Ms. Barry, you're muted. Can you unmute?
There, the host, I guess, did it. Anyway, the question was, again, please?
To you, Marg, do you think you made a mistake
Margaret,
that
yes.
day? Margaret, do you think you made a mistake that day by not having your dog on the leash like the bylaw wants us to do?
Well, sure, I admitted that. I didn't know the difference. I was following the lead of numerous people who were down there with their dogs off leash, so I assumed that it was okay. So if you're asking me now that I know, and I've already expressed that to the bylaw officer, that don't punish Elliot. It's my fault. I didn't know he couldn't be off leash.
I guess. Todd.
Councillor Watson.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Well, I guess since you didn't know, we're gonna, it's not Elliot's fault, but
No.
you've made it his fault. So by your actions, so it's too bad.
It is a shame. If you want to muzzle me, that'd be much more appropriate. But you can't punish him for something that his owner did wrong. And I've made that very clear right from the start. Don't punish an innocent animal who was, by the way, I should mention as well, I was told by the young people who did not sneak up on me. I said I didn't see them until they were right up there, but they told me that he snapped at Elliot. So I'm going on what they said. So it's as simple as that. And I apologize for saying this, for not having him on a leash, but I didn't know any better. And we've been doing it since, oh God, after his 2 surgeries. That was where we went to rehab. Someone suggested that'd be a good place because there's lots of room and there's water and there's snow, which was all really good for him to walk and run in.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. At this time, does council want to go into closed?
Are we
Do I
having
have a,
closing remarks?
yes, Nick?
I think it would make sense to have closing submissions before going into closed session.
Okay, we will do closing remarks then now.
Thank you. And is there a time limitation on the closing remarks so that I can frame my information accordingly?
They're 5 minutes.
I will put the stopwatch on now.
To come out of closed. Counselor Halpin, Counselor Connors,
Mr. Chair, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Halpin, seconded by Counselor Connors. The council adjourned from closed session and returned to open session at 4:06 PM.
I'll call the vote.
Counselor Halpin,
Yes.
Counselor Watson,
Yes.
Counselor Connors,
Yes.
Counselor Bogman,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Everyone has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. If there is no further questioning, is council prepared to make a decision on the potential designation? Counselor Watson?
Yeah, I move to designate the dog as a dangerous dog.
Is there a seconder? Counselor Halpin? And we'll call the vote. Is there any questions on this? Ms. Leach, do you want to read the motion, please?
Mr. Chair, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Watson, seconded by Counselor Halpin, that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Central Elgin confirm the designation of Elliot, a Rottweiler, as a dangerous dog pursuant to bylaw 465, and that the owner of such dangerous dog shall forthwith comply with all control requirements provided for in the original notice issued by the municipal law enforcement officer.
I'll call the vote.
Counselor Halpin,
Yes.
Counselor Watson,
Yes.
Counselor Connors,
No.
Counselor Bogman,
No.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Counselor Watson, Counselor Connors? Call the vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Watson, seconded by Counselor Connors, that the dangerous dog hearing dated Friday, June 16th, 2023, be adjourned at 4:09 PM.
We'll call the vote.
Counselor Halpin,
Yes.
Counselor Watson,
Yes.
Counselor Connors,
Yes.
Counselor Bogman,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.